Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn, and today we're discussing a case from BC about open drug use in public spaces. British Columbia has pursued drug decriminalization policies as a way to address the opioid crisis. Health Canada granted an exemption beginning in 2023 under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act so that adults in British Columbia will not be arrested or charged for possessing small amounts of drugs for personal use. Those drugs include opioids like heroin and fentanyl, crack and cocaine, meth, and MDMA. There was some public concern over decriminalization combined with open drug use. So, in October of 2023, the BC government passed the Restricting Public Consumption of Illegal Substances Act, which banned open drug use in many public spaces: parks, playgrounds, splash pads, sports fields, beaches, bus stops, and entrances to homes and businesses. The law allowed for police officers to direct drug users away from these prohibited areas, and if they refused, to arrest them. This prohibition on open drug use was challenged by the Harm Reduction Nurses Association, who claims the law violates the charter rights of people who use drugs. They also sought and received an interim injunction blocking enforcement of the law. Here today to discuss the law and the case are two experts. Adam Zivo is a reporter who specializes in drug policy and the director of the Center for Responsible Drug Policy. And we will then be joined by a harm reduction advocate. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today. What can you tell me about how drug decriminalization as a policy has worked out in British Columbia?
It's failed miserably, and part of the reason is that the BC government didn't implement many of the other support systems that have historically been used to make decriminalization successful. So decriminalization did well in Portugal 20 years ago because the Portuguese government invested significantly into expanding treatment capacity and forcing drug users who are caught with small levels of drugs to be diverted into healthcare. It's not as if you could do whatever you wanted. You were sent to a commission where fines and other punishments were used to make you seek treatment. In BC, we didn't have any of that. There was no emphasis on treatment, no attempt to divert people. We basically just let people do what they wanted. And as a result, overdoses only continued to climb and public disorder exploded.
So there has been this move for decriminalization in BC. There were obviously a lot of concerns from members of the public. So the BC government brought in this law banning open drug use in many specific public places. What are some of those areas, and what's the legal status of open drug use in, I guess, other areas? I mean, it says the law seems to say no drug use on splash pads, for example, but can you use drugs, on the sidewalk or in a parking garage? Where do things stand?
Well, we have to keep in mind that there are two levels of law that are governing public drug use in BC today. So, decriminalization was made possible by a federal exemption, and the BC government asked the federal government to adjust that exemption to ban public drug use in splash pads, playgrounds, and skate parks. Then, 2 weeks later, and this was last October, they passed Bill 34, the law that you had mentioned, which banned, once again, drug use in those spaces, and then also banned it in, let's say, near entrances of homes and businesses and near public transit stops. But you can still use drugs in alleyways and many parking lots and in many sidewalks that are farther away from dense downtown cores.
So it's interesting to me that it's the BC government has brought in this law because I think that this is an NDP government that has pretty, I guess you'd characterize them as strong bona fides in harm reduction. This is a pro decriminalization government that is very concerned with taking this harm reduction approach. So why did they, they've implemented this decriminalization. Why did they bring in this law exactly to restrict open drug use?
Well, it's a testament to how disastrous decriminalization has been. There's an election coming up in a few months in BC, and I think that the BC NDP are quite worried about the backlash coming from the public against decriminalization. Parents are so tired of having their kids find syringes in playgrounds. They're tired of their kids walking through clouds of meth. And if you want to keep your state government, you have to be able to pivot.
hmm it's fascinating to me that this is what's happening in BC. What can you tell me about the scope of the drug problem there compared to the rest of Canada? We've only got about 30 seconds.
Well, I mean, BC is the epicenter of the overdose crisis in Canada. This is a province that saw 2,500 deaths just last year. So it is at a different scale.
Wow. It's certainly tragic, and every single death from a drug overdose is a tragic one. I understand people all have different views on what the solution is. We've got to go to commercial break now, but when we come back, I want to talk about that injunction that the BC harm reduction nurses obtained. We'll be right back.